Welcome to Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast. Because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. I'm Shana Buckner, STEM educator, consultant, author, and the voice behind the Equity Builds Expertise framework. And after years of helping teachers, school leaders, engineers, and technical teams grow their people, I've learned something pretty simple. And that's that classrooms and companies really face some of the same challenges. And it's going to be the same solutions that change everything. So here, we're going to talk about what really builds expertise. We're talking about belonging, access, agency, clarity, communication, and those everyday decisions that actually shape how people think, learn, and collaborate. So if you're committed to growing your people, whether we're talking about students or staff, teachers or engineers, then this is the space for you. So pull up a chair, grab your notebook, and join me as we bridge the worlds between STEM education and STEM industry and build the expertise that truly lasts. This is Equity Builds Expertise, the podcast. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Equity Builds Expertise podcast, because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. All right, so in our last episode, you got to hang with my baby brother and myself, Art Worrell, as we talked about what it takes to build independent learners and independence. It happens through structure, access, clarity. But today, we're actually going to shift into leadership. Because let's face it, at some point, the question becomes who is responsible for creating those conditions? So this episode is about culture. And the truth is culture is not something that you can delegate. So let's get into it. Culture is one of the most overused words in leadership. Everyone wants great culture. We put it on websites. We mention it during interviews. We write it into our strategic plans. But then something interesting happens. When trust begins to erode, when communication breaks down, when people stop speaking up, when new employees struggle to belong, when students start to disengage, and when teams become divided, someone says, we need HR to fix it. Or we should have someone lead culture. But here's what I've learned. After more than 30 years leading classrooms, schools, leadership, teams, and organizations, you actually can't delegate culture. And it's because culture isn't a department. It's a pattern. It's created by what leaders consistently notice, what they reinforce, what they ignore, what they reward, what they interrupt, and repeat. Today, we're talking about one of the biggest misconceptions in leadership. Culture is not something you announce. It's something people experience. So culture is built in the smallest moments. When organizations talk about culture, they usually start with the biggest things. So they start with mission statements, core values, retreats, professional development, team building activities. And let me tell you, all those things actually matter, but they don't build culture by themselves. People don't experience culture during the annual retreats. They experience it on Tuesday morning. They experience it in meetings, in performance reviews. They experience it when they make a mistake, when they ask a question, when someone disagrees with them, when people are feeling overwhelmed, when they're new. Culture is what happens during your daily activities. It isn't your keynote. It's what happens between the keynotes. It's the thousands of tiny moments that quietly answer one question. What happens here when people are still learning? Because every organization teaches people something. And sometimes it's intentionally, and sometimes it's accidentally. Some organizations even teach how to ask questions. Others teach, figure it out yourself. Some teach, we collaborate. Others quietly reward competition. Some say, we value innovation, but punish every failed attempt. People believe what leaders do far more than what leaders say. Here's something I wish more leaders understood. The moment you become responsible for people, you also become responsible for learning. Whether your title says teacher, principal, engineering manager, vice president, director, CEO, the point is that you are teaching every single day. You're teaching what good work looks like. You're teaching what gets rewarded. You're teaching how conflicts get handled. You're teaching who belongs. You're teaching whether mistakes become learning, and whether those are learning opportunities or whether they're career-ending events. Leadership is teaching. So whether you intended to become a teacher or not, you are one. And here's why this matters. Because if learning stops, then growth stops. And if growth stops, then innovation stops. And if innovation stops, then organizations begin protecting what they already know instead of discovering what is possible. That is not a talent problem, it is a culture problem. One of the simplest leadership truths I've ever learned is this, and that is that people repeat what gets rewarded, not necessarily what gets praised. So what gets rewarded? Think about that. If someone takes a thoughtful risk and gets criticized, everyone else learns. If someone stays silent and avoids accountability, everyone else learns. If collaboration takes longer than working alone, but promotions only recognize individual achievement, people learn. Every system is perfectly designed to reproduce the behaviors it rewards. Which means that culture actually isn't mysterious, it's observable. If you want to understand your culture, don't read the values on the wall. Watch the decisions. Who gets promoted? Who gets interrupted? Who gets coached? Who gets written off? Who gets another chance? Who gets invited to important conversations? Who receives the most honest feedback? Who doesn't? Those decisions become the curriculum that everyone studies. As I said, whether you realize it or not, it's happening. And sometimes leaders hear words like belonging or psychological safety and assume that we're talking about making work easier. But we're not. We're talking about making learning possible. Because neuroscience actually tells us something really important, and that's that people learn best when they can take intellectual risks without fear of humiliation. That doesn't mean lowering standards, and it simply means that we're going to separate mistakes from a person's identity. And one of my favorite questions to ask leaders is this. When someone on your team says, "I don't know," what happens next? Do people rush to judgment, or do they become curious? Because "I don't know" is often the doorway to expertise. No one arrives knowing everything. Every expert was once inexperienced. Every scientist, every engineer, every educator, every executive. Expertise develops, which means that culture, right? Culture that punishes learning, that's also limiting expertise. Here's another truth that I've learned, and that's that people mirror leaders far more than leaders even realize. If leaders become defensive, teams become cautious. If leaders become curious now, teams start to become curious. If leaders admit mistakes, others begin admitting mistakes. If a leader asks for feedback, then others begin giving feedback. Leadership isn't contagious because of authority. It's contagious because people constantly watch for cues about what is safe. Every meeting, every email, every response, every decision is sending a signal. The question isn't whether you're sending signals. The question is whether you're sending the ones that you intended. You know, one thing that people often ask me is, so then how do we even change culture? They're usually hoping for one initiative, one workshop, one consultant, one book, one keynote, right? And I love workshops. I write books. I host conferences, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And I absolutely believe learning matters. But there's no single event that changes culture. Culture changes when leaders consistently practice something new. And practice means that you're doing it over and over and over again. One meeting at a time, one conversation at a time, one coaching moment at a time. Culture is not built through announcements. It's built through repetition. And that's why I often say that people don't trust what organizations promise. They trust what organizations consistently practice. So let me leave you with a few questions. I want you to think about your classroom. Think about your department. Think about your leadership team. Think about your organization. What are people actually learning from being around you? Not what you hope they're learning, but what are they actually experiencing? When someone struggles, what do they learn? When someone succeeds, what do they learn? When someone disagrees, what do they learn? And when someone makes a mistake, what do they learn? Because culture isn't created during your best day. It's revealed during your hardest one. And remember this, you don't have to be perfect. None of us are. Leadership isn't about not getting it wrong or never getting it wrong. It's about consistently creating the conditions where people can keep growing, including yourself. That's how expertise develops, not by accident, but by design. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If today's conversation challenged your thinking, I'd love for you to share this episode with another leader who's building a team, or leading a school, or managing a department, or even shaping the culture of an organization. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I hope you'll subscribe and leave a review, because it helps more educators, more leaders, more organizations discover these conversations. Until next time, remember this: culture isn't something that you assign to someone else. It's something that you model every single day. Because whether you teach it or build it, expertise grows where equity leads. I'll see you next time in the next episode. Bye. Wow, that was great, right? Listen, culture isn't what we say. It's what people experience every single day. So here's what I want you to sit with. What are people actually learning from how things operate in your space? Our next episode, I'm joined by Lila Plamondon, and we're going to talk about the difference between leadership and management, and why that discussion matters even more than we think it may. I'm going to see you in the next episode. And as I always say, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone that you're learning alongside.